Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we're raised in this. Yeah, just this normalcy filter.
Yes.
It's engineered early on in our lives, and
Hmm.
it's very firm, and it definitely has its place,
Yeah.
and it's allowed the Western world to flourish as it did, of course, but
Hmm.
and as we're now in this, as it's been said, this Iron Age, the Kali
Yeah.
Yuga,
Right.
just everything's just so material. It's just the weight of materialism is starting to crush us, I think, as we can all sort of see.
This is the Casual Temple podcast, and you are listening to episode number 7, and I'm your host, Merrily Duffy. The Casual Temple is a place to discuss the many ways we are connected to the unseen world and how that empowers us to know our true selves. This week, my guest is Iain Shelley, who joins the podcast to discuss the book Daimonic Reality by Patrick Harpur, which is a book that explains Harpur's theories that we are living in and amongst daimons who are desperately trying to grab our attention to get us to remember who we really are. Iain is a fellow occult practitioner and esoteric book enthusiast, so he gives some wonderful book recommendations in our discussion. You will also get to know what a ghost raccoon is, so you don't want to miss it. Thank you all for joining us here at the Casual Temple. Our guest today is Iain Shelley, who's a fellow magic practitioner who's exploring the left-hand path, and he's also a busy small business owner who's on the move, existing here in Malkuth. Iain is joining me today to review and discuss the book Daimonic Reality by Patrick Harpur, which I will hold up the book without the dust cover because none of us like that.
Mine doesn't have it either.
Yeah.
No, I should grab it, actually. I'm gonna grab it.
If you want to grab it, that's cool. Mine also has lots of colorful tabs because I took many notes because it's an amazing book. So just so the audience is aware. And I'll also point out, if you get a copy of the book, right there, it says my name, right on the, right in there. It's to
I know.
Just
no,
so
what
you
is
know.
up with that? I forgot about it. When I reread it this time for this show, I forgot, and I saw it again. It was just as surprising. That's the first time. Actually, a little more, because we had this connection, but we were both going to talk about it. So yeah, I don't know the explanation behind that, but
I looked into it.
It's oh, well, the explanation is not as good, is it? Right? I mean,
no, it's
the demonic interpretation, I say, is more fun.
Yes,
it's to you.
I agree. I think it's to me. It's really to his sister.
Okay, yeah.
I'm gonna say it's
sister. It's Sister Merrily. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna call this right now to the listeners that this is, I guess it's like a casual book or Casual Temple book club episode. So I'm just gonna read the intro to Daimonic Reality for those who aren't familiar, a little synopsis. So Daimonic Reality, a field guide to the other world by Patrick Harpur, was published in 1992. And it's in the same vein as Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée. Some of you might be familiar with that book. That was published in 1969. Both authors are attempting to describe the overlapping similarities of paranormal experiences, such as seeing the undead, ghosts, fairies, UFOs, aliens, etc. Where Vallée's work was more of a catalog, Harpur differs in offering more, like, he has like really good writing skills and is a really good storyteller. I don't feel Vallée shares that.
Okay.
In my opinion. And so just for the listeners and viewers, the book is separated into 3 sections: apparitions, visions, and otherworld journeys. So the working theory is the title of the book, that we are all living in daimonic reality all the time, and that daimons are getting impatient for us to notice them. There it is. What do you think, Iain? I'm happy that you wanted to chat about this, but what is your sort of overall take, I guess, on the book?
Yeah, I enjoyed the book a lot the first time I read it, and I've had this fun tour of going through books I started when I was closer to the beginning of my practice or occult reading, before I got largely addicted to all the books I have now when I was still fairly early on, when we were in that Foolish Fish server.
Yeah.
And it was recommended then. And the change in how I've interpreted it has, it's been pretty pronounced, and just my understanding really, and being able to accept multiple truths at the same time. And it's basically not being obsessed with explanations, rational ones, fully logical ones, the satisfying ones we've all grown up and almost come to feel entitled to. And so I think a lot of apparitions, Patrick definitely agrees that a lot of the things, that events or apparitions that happen to people, are direct results of our need to fully explain and grasp and be able to hold it, and measure it. And a lot of these events are just direct taunts to that reflex, and getting over it has been a long process. And learning different magical systems like qabalah, the tree of life, tarot, having all this encyclopedic system, working system in your head, and having and understanding it deeply, so where it just kind of operates on a subconscious level. It's taken a long time. Relatively, I mean, I'm not that old, but I've only been doing this for, I don't know, like 4-ish years, something like that. But like the changes in psyche, I would say daimonic psyche, developing it it just happens over time. It's not something you really notice,
right,
day to day or something. It's not a linear progression. It's just something that sort of happens by osmosis almost. And just a willingness, a definite willingness to let go. There's definitely a letting go of concreteness, where you just let the otherworldly aspects seep in, and without this reflexive judgment that would basically make them disappear.
Right.
The moment you try, a lot of that stuff, you get these strong feelings, or these presences, and then the moment you instantly try to explain it, it just disappears. Poof. It just kind of goes. And so you have to try to, I mean, I think I'm always going to do it, but it's just recognizing it when it happens, and then feeling the interplay between the two reflexes of the Apollonian, Apollo, he's from afar, he's logical, he's cold, the Western mind, basically, the empirical need, the science and all that, versus the more Dionysian, emotive, sensual, daimonic, interpretation. It's being able to hold both those mindsets simultaneously, I think. And daimonic reality, none of this is really understandable with the Apollonian mindset fully. And I think that's the one I came in with first, as I was still more unable to understand a lot of stuff. And so now the second time around, it's been being able to hold two truths and being able to experience it with Patrick has been very fulfilling. I liked it a lot the second time around.
Yeah, I agree with that. I totally on board with sort of being new and having the Apollonian mindset when I first read it, and then now just having crazy experiences, and exactly what you said, like experiencing weird timelines and apparitions and the reality, and you're like, oh, got it.
Embodied. So you gotta feel it. You have to feel it in yourself. The embodiment, the embodied experience is very important. And it's something that I probably haven't had as much. I don't get the as far as direct experiences, what are my experiences like? I've thought about, I read the Jung, well, I read it in his Red book, but his theory of integration, of parts of yourself that repress and then will crop up later, crop up in your consciousness if you suppress them too long, they'll go wild, if that sort of thing. And he says, like, if you're decently integrated, you're not going to really have these visions of things within yourself And that's not as fun, and because he describes this patient who would see these orbs, these light orbs by her curtains floating, and it's just like, oh, these are externalized traumas or whatever. It's just kind of like, yeah, but that's cool as well. She gets to see things.
Yeah.
And I haven't really, I don't see things, not without chemical assistances, or something like that. It's a more deep intuitive sense that I've developed as far as for my own direct experiences. It's trusting intuition a lot. And it's maybe if I don't hear voices in my head, like I keep waiting, for the holy guardian angel or the personal daemon to come in and talk to me. I haven't had that, but I definitely can sort of think, some voices in your head, I think, all the time. And sometimes some of the voices seem more profound than others.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to parse just, your thoughts versus maybe some external thoughts coming in, and, maybe, some inspirations of some kind.
Right.
That aren't directly yours, is trying to be able to figure out which is which. And so it's been a bit more of a passive experience.
Right.
And I guess I would love to be trying the more ceremonial Solomonic, conjurations and stuff, but it's a space issue.
Right.
And it's it's practicality, but I'm also just kind of lying about, I could do it if I really wanted to. Definitely fear aspects, but it's something I would be interested in. But managing expectations also, I think, has been very important, because if you come in with a certain mindset, especially with pop culture and stuff, with what you can do, especially like I said with Solomonic conjurations, you do everything and you expect to see the demon sitting in a triangle, and it's not, he's not gonna be squatting there like an ape, it's right. It's gonna be something, you have to do it over and over again until you work yourself into a bit of a frenzy. Maybe you don't eat that day, you kind of get yourself into a state. But as far as I can't keep going back to that, but personal experience has just been it's been mostly with keeping consistent as consistent as I can practice. And that's a challenge, but I'm sure we'll get into that later.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny that you were mentioning the Solomonic limitations of space, because most of the recommendations is not to do it in your house. Right.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I could do it outside. I've got some space I could imagine doing it in. I like a place I like to give offerings to, and outside, a place like that. But but it's also intimidating.
Yes. Yeah, it's a little like I'll work up to that.
Yeah, but I need to it sounds exciting.
So I know that in our sort of like a little bit of pre-chat that we did in Discord, you mentioned the soul world and the Anima Mundi.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you, like, I have Patrick Harpur's sort of definition of it, but do you have a good handle on that yourself that you want to share?
Yeah. Moving off sorry. So I oftentimes, when I try to think of how I define things, I just think of the author of who I learned it from a lot of the times. And I get a lot of, it's not imposter syndrome, because I'm not pretending to be anything, particularly, it's like, but it's something like imposter syndrome, where it's like, is any of this knowledge, it's just stuff I read and I can just regurgitate. So it's like, how much do I actually understand? But that's just something. But I can give my definition. I can always just think of who I've learned this stuff from.
Yeah. And
I wonder how much of it. But so I'm just gonna go right in with Jung. It's the collective unconscious. It's psychologically, I think it's the easiest way. I think the easiest way to explain it, is some loose psychological aspects, especially for, I guess, most people, not familiar with some more esoteric stuff. So it's the collective unconscious. It was, it's the also known as the soul of the world. It's this it's not formless, but it's of infinite form. and it's that's people also refer to it as the black dragon, the demiurgic mass. That's what I've been also getting into, the completely inscrutable Black Dragon series by Peter Hamilton Giles is stuff I've been struggling to grasp. I've been trying to apply to it this sort of. So yeah, it's I'm sorry, collective unconscious. It's where the archetypes live. It's where I'm also getting into Austin Osman Spare. It's where the primordial ids live. It's where the these primal drives of hunger, sex, even shelter. It's where all these desires come from. Mm-hmm. And they get to express themselves through us, or through any creature really, but they get to experience through limitation. So in the soul, in the collective unconscious, it's just exists as is without time, and it needs to go within time to be embodied in order to experience. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's how sort of the interplay between the unconscious world and conscious.
Yeah
it's very hard to define.
It is hard to define, like it is, because I agree with that. The way Patrick Harpur did it, because I'm very much about like, I got to put things in. I know this is the logic Apollonian thing, but I'm like, I gotta
have to be able to do both. Yeah. It's so hard.
It's super hard. So he kind of puts it in these, I think of things of like as in containers, right? He's basically like the human soul. So his explanation is the soul world, or Anima Mundi, is where the human soul is mediated between the spirit and the body. So it's kind of saying that there's more souls for you. There's more forms of you that are sort of like existing. And so that's kind of where that's at. And that is also like, if I'm thinking about like containers, like the collective unconscious is basically like one container that we're all a part of, or like something that we can tap into. Exactly what you were saying.
Yeah.
But then you said, and then you mentioned, and now I'm like, I'm going to have to take notes about the book you mentioned. So you said the Black Dragon. Is that like talking about Gnosticism? Is that what that's going into?
Yeah, well, it's about exploring non-being through just basically, it's exploring non-being, and the only way we can explore it is with words and experience or whatever. So it's sort of how it's the interplay between being and non-being, is a way of interacting with the formless and formful void. And it's explored through the archetypal image of a dragon, of the black dragon, which carries a lot of biblical implications, and it's very strong archetypal imagery used to explore these ideas. And it's got a long tradition with that extremely expensive Black Dragon book I've always been chasing on eBay, the Andrew Chumbley, along with the Exotia. It's a long explored tradition, I guess, of the old company of cunning folk, in the Dragon's Column, I guess, over in England. It's the tradition, it's a sort of it feels like it's a current of witchcraft, of cunning folk witchcraft, which is they're trying to either revive or continue this tradition. It's very inscrutable from the outside, but and so the Black Dragon, it's about, you could basically call them the collective unconscious. It's a form of that, of carrying all forms within itself, but none at the same time, both with and without form.
Cool. Yeah, it seems like it's a good companion to this particular book. So now I'm like, I gotta figure out how to get my copy and read it.
That's cool. Well, what's been actually helping with this one is Frater Auker's works, his goetic works. I find his interactions with this, with this sort of material, daimonic, as what he does with Holy Daimon in his series. He's I think he's a very good his material is very good to work with as well in accompaniment with this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm pretty sure I have one of his books I have not started yet. Of course, I read Holy Daemon, and then like his latest book. But yeah, I got to finish out that series.
Holy Heretics. Yeah.
Holy Heretics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we'll just kind of get into sort of the personal aspect for you. And, so as an occult and magic practitioner, have you had your own personal experiences with either your own personal daemon or just Daimonic Reality in particular, if you'd like to share some of those?
Yeah. A phrase I've come to, I've crystallized it, is the ghost raccoon. And it's something I think of frequently as a just way to keep my reality tunnel, as keep my my Apollonian reflex a little loose. Is that if I was at a time when I was driving, you could be just driving past a street at night. You just pass a street and you glance down it as you drive by it, and you just see a raccoon, and that raccoon's real to you. Could be just a plastic bag, could be not real at all. But the point is that raccoon exists for you, as real as anything else. Especially for your memory, you drove by a raccoon. That raccoon exists as far as it's free. Especially if you start telling people about it, then that's real to a bunch of other people too. So it's just like it's a version of the game of telephone, basically, where and it becomes accepted. That becomes accepted that raccoon existed for people, and that's it's a. So I just think it keeps so I think of it as a ghost, because it does very well didn't exist at all, but you can't be sure,
right? And
so it's just both being able to live in both worlds and accept both possibilities. But that's as far as as Daimonic Reality is, just being able to not live in a Euclidean world of just living on a plane with a plate going from place to place. I think of life is a series of experiences and embodied stories. So like every trip, with my job, and we go down across the state to do my craft, serve the kettle corn and all, the traveling, it's you kind of feel like traveling with Mercury on his chariot, down along the highways. You sort of romanticize the experiences. I don't really, interstates, and travel becomes a form of time travel, because you're not consciously you're not consciously aware of that time often when you travel down it. And that leads into the UFO discussion, actually, about lost time. Yeah. And it was actually how I was able to most easily grasp, a lot of these experiences people has that Patrick talks about. About people, a lot of time it's people when they're driving. It's about, a lot of this lost time aspect, which we can all relate to. Just feeling where you just kind of snap to and realize, I haven't been paying attention for the past 15 minutes. I don't know what's happened, but I'm safe, and time goes on. And so it's those experiences. So like exploring those times where you're in these liminal areas, like the roads, especially traveling, especially at night, where your consciousness is in a liminal place as well, where these events can happen. And so, hearing about the stuff where you could just where they just find themselves further down the road with this lost time in their heads. And then later on, they'll get the hypnotherapy to figure out exactly what happened. And they'll find all these crazy, wacky stories, about UFOs, and finding, about what goes on in it. And, the question is, did this happen?
Yeah, I think he talks about it as like, well, he talks about the mechanics of what's happening. He says it's like you're hypnotized, right? You're basically hypnotized driving, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
Kind of enter that flow state, sort of. It's so I guess if you go into that when he tells stories about when people visit hypnotherapists to figure out what happened during these supposed abductions, they come up with these rich stories, So Patrick's explanations, that he says, that these stories come from the collective unconscious, about these, archetypes. It's about, oftentimes with UFOs, it's about what's foreign or about what's different, or, like in the 50s, it was about these beautiful beings, these beautiful luminous robed beings. And in the 60s, as our fear of technology grew, they started to become these technology, centered beings, the little green, little gray men focused on, exploration of our bodies, with science and stuff. It's you can tell it, if you accept the premise that these, UFOs change according to our cultural fears, or, embodied fears.
Yeah, I think I didn't think of it in that logical of a pattern that you just put in. It made me think about how recently in ufology, like some of the discussions I've heard about what the grays are, and is one that I heard that was really cool. Like somebody talked about his gray abduction experience, but he felt like the grays were being like, how did he explain it? Like the actual, it's like a suit, but it's being remote, like controlled far away by like a consciousness. And I was like, whoa, that's totally crazy. And then probably the other explanation that I've heard recently, and you probably have also heard this, is like, oh, they're just like future humans, right, coming back. And we're all like weird looking.
I saw Interstellar. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I saw that movie.
Yeah.
But I think like in the progression of how you laid it out, it's like, yeah, those are sort of our fears, right? That that we're going to become some sort of weird, sexless, nutless thing or whatever. Yeah.
It's been very, the different forms they take, and it's I like it, speculating, well, what's next then, because I feel like the alien archetype's been going for a while. Because they sort of follows the between what first they seems to come from below, as demons and devils, because that's what people determined to be. Well, before it was just the underworld, and now our underworld is kind of is outer space. And so they, that's what they, instead of coming from below, they now come from above. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a different place they can come from next.
Well, it's probably, I think the next place is, you and I are probably familiar with like inner dimensions and things like that, but I think the public at large,
I was thinking that,
is becoming more accepting of that. And so we're probably hearing more around interdimensional beings from, like, I don't want to put this in like a negative connotation, but like regular people, right, who are having experiences.
Yep. I mean, psychedelics is what's letting us all do it, really. It's
that's true.
This new age of acceptability with psychedelics is definitely opening up some minds and accepting some realities as well.
So I asked you about your own sort of personal experience with daimons. Do you know of anybody connected to you personally? I mean, you don't have to share names or anything like that, but that has had like an experience that they relayed to you?
Ooh.
Or maybe not.
I can't say I have.
Okay.
Not nothing profound. I mean, there's probably a lot of stories that just kind of fade into the background. Which is kind of an aspect of them, is that the only way we can sort of carry on sane in this reality, if it is true that all these crazy apparitions and happenings can happen, is that we just sort of have this filtering technique of our memory where crazy things can happen, but we have this sort of just normalcy filter where your brain just kind of smooths it over. Just and you just kind of, it's the Apollonian reflex as well, where you just kind of like, even if you can't think of the explanation, just kind of like you trust that there is one.
Right.
Just kind of, like, even if I can't think of it, it's just like, well, it's probably swamp gas, because swamp gas gas is a thing. I've always heard that, for you, swamp gas, like, oh, okay, yeah, it's swamp gas. But as far as lots of ghost stories, of course, I think lots of local legends as well. I can think of definitely lots of local urban legends, which Patrick loves covering as well. Their daimonic nature, urban legends, along with hoaxes, that they all share in this same phenomena.
Right.
Things that even if people are faking them, that comes from somewhere. And so I found that interesting as well. But
because I would say but oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was rambling. You're good.
So what I was going to relay with that is my own personal experience in my family. So my mother is Filipino, and so she would tell me this story of her grandmother. Her name was Dionysia, and she would tell me, oh yeah, my grandmother would warn all of us, like the whole family, do not go into that bamboo forest without asking me first. And then they were like, okay. And then of course a great uncle or an uncle of mine goes into the forest without asking Grandma Dionysia first, and he breaks his leg, right? Goes into the forest, breaks his leg.
Yeah.
And then she was like, damn it. And then he gets sick too. He gets like violently sick. So Grandma Dionysia, of course, like cusses him out about going to the forest.
She knew.
Yes.
Right.
And then so she had to go with like a pile, like a food and offerings, and go into the forest. And she had to talk for hours into that forest to like get to heal her son, I guess. And it worked, apparently, according to my mom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I always think about that because in the Philippines, right, sort of in this Apollonian Dionysian context that we're talking about, like cultures like that, they're more connected to more of the emotional side of things, more imaginative, right? And so something that for me growing up as in the American culture, I always thought like, oh, it was like something, it felt naive to me, right? Like, oh, so naive and so like, oh, they just don't, not cool.
We're raised in this, just this normalcy filter is just it's engineered early on in our lives, and it's very firm, and it definitely has its place. It's allowed the Western world to flourish as it did, of course, but and as we we're now in this, as it's been said, this Iron Age, the Kali Yuga, just everything's just so material. It's just the weight of materialism is starting to crush us, I think, as we can all sort of see, as at least we have been, this new age, with psychedelics or whatever. If we and if you follow a more Thelemic paradigm of aeons, is this of the past aeon and the current and the new aeon of just where we're going to be thinking differently now, where it's going to be the way I see it anyways. I should just be saying how my interpretation of the procession of the aeons of Aleister Crowley, as he said, is that as we move into it, it's an age of existing more on the astral plane, and with that comes a lot of problems. I think social media is the creation of and the progression of how social media has affected us is a symptom of us living more on the astral. It allows us to exist as entire separate personas for some people online. It's allowed entire existences online for people to have. It enables stuff like this, of course, and with it comes a lot less stability, in the collective unconscious, especially a lot of as we're going through a lot of turmoil, a lot of change, as we sort of have a more as consciousness and reality around us becomes a bit more mutable. I think we're like children, we're the child god Harpur. It's we're trying to find our way now, and it's messy, but
yeah,
it's how we're trying to find our way.
Oh man, you just drew like a really good line from Aleister Crowley and the Aeon to social media in the astral realm. That was good. I never
I
considered that.
try.
Yeah.
I ramble a lot, but I try to get some gems out of me.
No, I followed it. It was great. Now I'm gonna have to chew on that too.
Yeah, cool, good.
Yeah. Let's see. So we did touch on UFOs. I'm just gonna ask if you personally have ever had sort of an experience with either UFO. Oh, you have? Let's hear it.
Yeah, well, it's just something I've been obsessed with. It's a thought I'm obsessed with having whenever I read about these all of the events Patrick talks about in the book. They all feel like something I've experienced. It's not that I have, it's just that it seems to meld so perfectly into my own memory, where it's like when he relays these stories, it's kind of, I just accept them, as like, yep, that I can see that happening. When like even the really weird ones, when like the ship looks like the inside of it looks like stone and he hands them pancakes, it's just like I can feel the dreamlike aspects of that. The sort of, I guess, not uncanny, but it seems to follow uncanniness, seems to follow dreamlike, liminal. They all seem to come out, all those words seem to follow, but I can instantly relate to them. And so it just seems really true that these events come from something that we all are connected to, these images, archetypes, ids, they change with our cultural filter, as things change, but they're always the same. And so no matter what he's describing, whatever happens, there's a lot of different events, but I can see it. I can really feel it. I accept it. From the Celtic fairy forts to the these to the crazy abductions. They just seem like things that I can not believe happened, because that's the question. Did these things actually happen? They sort of did. They did, like stories, like a story happened. Did Star Wars happen? Like that sort of thing. It's they happen, but I think especially with the I guess we're all having UFO experiences.
That's true.
Right now. I guess I should it's, and I don't know about you, but hearing about them, I have little interest. Like when it came to the hearings and stuff about this guy, I'm kind of like, it's cynical and edgy, but it's just like, whoa, what are they trying to distract us from right now with these stories? It's just like, and that's probably the case. I don't know, but it's because we're not going to hear about it from in a Congress here, but I'm very interested. But these things, regardless, I think there's still a lot of evidence of these events happening, a lot of military footage and stuff.
Yeah,
and I reflexively want to explore the logical explanations of the tic tacs and things, but the truth is that I think is that it can't be explained, not rationally, not like the crop circles,
right?
Or UFOs. It's just that it's a direct sorry, let me just think about this. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I said I always chew on them as well. I chew on the idea of crop circles a lot, because it's just something that if you accept they existed, the pictures in the book, if you accept that those happened, that they were a thing that appeared on fields, and like you just try to explain to yourself, how did those happen? They're perfect. They tried to do experiments, with like scientists tried to replicate them and they couldn't, not with the precision that they appeared with. Right. And so you're forever going to be trying to explain that rationally. And, like I said, science is forever going to be, coming up with theories that explain 80% of it. It sounds pretty good. Plasma vortices,
sure.
Yeah. It's like that can happen. I've seen dust devils, I've seen wind happen. I've seen, flash fires happen. So, something combining the two could, like maybe plasma vortices, something, and it's just something that we can just comfortably sit with, and it's like science can just let that go. But if and then the normalcy filter kicks in, and then we also sort of collectively relegate crop circles to just sort of fiction. I think a lot of people just think that they're like this fun idea or urban legends. I think a lot of people would be shocked to see pictures of crop circles like as they were reported when they happened. I think a lot of us just, we just kind of accept them as possible fiction, and that's where it's just sort of gonna stay. I also think a lot about especially crop circle specifically was when Patrick explained, brought in Hermes and his role with Apollo, the legend of, when Hermes was a newborn, he swapped all the heads of, he swapped the ends of the cattle. He basically mutilated all of Apollo's immortal cat,
that's right,
calves, just as a random prank. And so I just sort of apply that. So, it's just sort of it's a taunt. It's like these events, UFOs and crop circles. Patrick puts them on a continuum. They between actually where he links plasma vortices to UFOs to fairies and then to what was the other one where he see if we can we get that?
Yeah, I can see the diagram.
Yeah, where it links all the phenomena. It's sort of between plasma vortices, as a scientific explanation of crop circles, to UFOs, to fairies, and then whirlwinds. And it sort of links them across a continuum that sort of changes based on your cultural understandings or context, basically.
Right.
And for them to all be, he does give a nice little tidy bow around linking phenomena together. And that's kind of what I like. And that you can't explain it all together, but I really like his idea that it all exists, as on a continuum as the same thing, but just what we see can vary.
Right.
And that, but it's all coming from the sort of, it's the taunt of Hermes, of a reflexive need to explain, and just that we can't.
Right.
But we will also be able to forget that fact and just kind of move on and live day to day. And so accepting both those realities is what I think daimonic reality is, because living fully in daimonic reality would just be being insane.
Yes.
So you need to be able to function as well. And I've always kind of thought of this sort of mindset as well. It's just a sort of controlled insanity where you just where you allow for crazy things, but live in a rational world.
Yeah. I mean, it makes it more interesting. Kind of, I mean, you're the example that you're talking about with like Hermes and Apollo's cattle. It's like, but why Hermes? He's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a baby. He was a baby at the time.
Yeah. Exactly.
He had it was pure reflex. And this it's just exactly why. And that leads, and that's sounds exactly like the chupacabra.
Yeah. And I know sort of, I had in our chat, I had mentioned sort of Freddie Silva, and he talks a lot about the crop circles. And so the reason I thought he's interesting is because he talks more around people's experiences, right? Like that's the evidence. Like, right. Like he has these examples of people seeing like steam rising from a field, and they go and look, and then there's a crop circle. Like there wasn't one there before, but now there's a crop. And so like you have to, do you believe somebody's story or do you not? Like, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, I've had this phrase in my head for a bit, that memories are daimonic. Every time you recall, a memory, as they say, everyone loves this little factoid, and every time you remember a memory, something's different. You change something's different. It's kind of like you're recalling the recall of the memory. And so, and how much of our identity is based on memory? It's kind of, people, there's arguments that if you wipe someone's memory, you kill them effectively. And for that to be so important and to be very daimonic at the same time, it's just to show that we're well, like daemons, we're both. We partake of both worlds,
right?
And so it's important, I think, to consciously acknowledge that, and it helps to live that way as well. Kind of letting go of the need for explanation has been very helpful for me in my own life, I must say.
Yeah. So I'm kind of reaching back to the earlier part of our discussion, because you talked about mentioning, well, because I know you are studying the Kabbalah, or have been studying the Kabbalah, or have in your past, and that's kind of a current obsession with mine as well. Okay. So how do you square, and you probably already answered this because you're talking about living in both of these understandings, but how do you square? Because basically the Kabbalah is like, you want an explanation for reality and consciousness and what's going on? Here you go, right? It's constantly laid out.
I love it. I gotta say, it's as far as chewing on things, I'll just fall asleep just going through the path, all of it, all of the it's really satisfying.
So how do you because I have trouble with this recently, squaring, because I don't want to fall into this trap of everything is the Kabbalah, which sometimes I'm like, everything is the Kabbalah, right?
I mean, I think as you learn it, you're just gonna it's just something it's the way you live for a while, and then it just sort of settles in and it just becomes a bit more background. It becomes a bit more background because or it's something I can just sort of think of if I want to, but but I definitely remember, you're just, because you're also struggling, you're trying to learn it and recall it well, do I remember it all?
Yes. Yeah. Do you remember all of the Kabbalah? Come on.
Oh, you like the Kabbalah? You like the Kabbalah? List all the paths.
Yeah. List the paths. List all the different worlds. List how you're like, oh God. Okay.
It seeps in over time. It really does, especially because it just helps you learn. I mean, you could learn it solely with just tarot. Just learning, just how tarot works. You can. That's largely how I did it. What I like is how it's all linked. So you sort of learn everything with everything else. It's like I'm not huge on astrology, but I know it. I never even made a point to learn it, but it's just something I learned passively, just through the needs of mostly tarot.
It's kind of like, I didn't intend on learning Hebrew, but guess what? It's kind of happening.
Exactly. No, I know all the numbers. Exactly. It's something that just happens passively, and that's just sort of like I said in the very beginning. Just building that that site. That consciousness, the magical consciousness. That can sort of, that very well accepts a daimonic one as well. I'd argue they're pretty much the same, probably.
Yeah. So again, sort of reaching back, because you mentioned, at least in occult.
Jump around.
Yeah, no. You mentioned so many great things. I'm trying to wanting to talk about them. But we talked about the hot topic, or I think it's always a hot topic, is the HGA, right? The Holy Guardian Angel in the occult, in the occult world, in certain systems. How do you think about that? How do you think about it? What do you in relation to sort of this Daimonic reality?
As far as the terms being very similar, because I think you could argue that the Daimonic reality Patrick Harpur describes is not the same as the holy daemon from Frater, but the daimonic aspect, I think very well, I think, applies to the Holy Guard in that it's partakes of both, of it being from, above and below, as far as Kabbalah, the Holy Guardian Angel is right in the middle in Tiphereth. So he's able to go both up and down, and sort of, as our higher self, as they say. As far as, personal experiences with my own, I think there's that voice that exists, but I think mostly it's just intuition, really. And I think it's just the contact that I have had is mostly just telling me to meditate. That's it. And I accept that. And I know it's true.
Yeah.
And that's always my advice to people, anyone really. It's just, it's what people, I think it's what I don't want to hear.
Yeah.
As well, which is, it's just kind of like, but that's why you need to do it. But yeah, it's precisely why. And it's been the most helpful thing. And so I continue to listen to my Holy Guardian Angel. Eventually, maybe he'll say something different, but I'm fine with just meditating because I know it's what I need to do. And I think that we'd all be better for it. I'm sorry to say, it's, is there a shortcut? There's no gallery of magic sigil of meditation, or,
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think any sort of anything is like, you probably just need to meditate, and nobody wants to hear it, because meditation is the opposite of what we have been learning to do our entire lives. Meaning, like, everybody, as soon as you're like 18, everybody's like, go, go, go. You have all these things you got to check off the list. You got to make sure, because you got to be a certain type of person. And then so you're just running, basically. And then now somebody's like, no, you just have to sit with your thoughts for like 30 minutes. Good luck.
Yeah.
And then it's because I do some healing work with some clients right now, and they're like, well, how do I listen to my guides? I'm like, you're not, pretty much what you just said, you're not gonna like to hear this, but you're gonna need to meditate. Because you need to parse out the different messages that are in your head, other people's messages, the messages you've been telling yourself, get that all out of there, and then you'll notice when the other thing comes in.
I mean, well, I find that step 2. Step 1 is just realizing that you're not your thoughts. It's first of all being like, realizing that there's something beside, like that was a big part for me, and just learning to center, and the centering with the little flame in the void has been very good. I think, I really like that method.
I think that Josephine talks about that method in her practice.
And Frater Rocker, I know.
Frater Rocker does too.
They're linked too, I know.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I think he helped write Queria with her, or something like that.
They work together. Something like that.
Well, cool. Let's see. Okay, so we talked about the HGA. I'm going to kind of roll into your thoughts on initiation rites, because I personally feel like that is a huge piece for Daimonic Reality. So I'll just leave it there. My question.
Yeah, definitely. I wrote for initiations. I found that they are used to usually break someone out of I'm actually, let's back up, because right now I'm reading Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. And it's about, it's a lot about to do with psychology, and he's sort of somewhat linked with the esoteric authors of the past, the famous ones, of there's a forward by Israel Regardi in it, but he talks about reality tunnels, and they're basically a series, a set of axioms, these sort of ways we interact with and live in the world. And so it's just sort of these automatic truths you accept, as far as axioms are, basically we live in a pretty Western reality tunnel, as they say, this Apollonian reality tunnel. It's just a fun way to sort of explain people, explain different points of view and stuff, like I'm not from their reality tunnel. You can sort of use a way to contextualize different points of view. And initiation rites, they're usually used to break someone out of their conventional reality tunnel and just to allow the mind to sort of be able to operate on the higher levels needed for whatever organization is doing these initiation rites for. It's just a way to prime the mind to be able to usually accept these systems that they're going to be learning and stuff. Sort of gets rid of that normalcy filter a bit, helps loosen it oftentimes, because a lot of times they're trying to recreate these profound archetypal experiences, like the Eleusinian mysteries. They said they reenacted Persephone being captured by Zeus and taken to the underworld, where they take the role of Persephone and experience the underworld, and then they get to come back up and take that knowledge with them. It was very important. Apparently, everyone who's who in ancient Greece did it. And so it's I sort of think as an example, it's initiation would be this way to, if you take an ant that lives in a largely two-dimensional world, it can't go up really. I mean, I know they go down, but they operate two-dimensionally, as you can imagine. Imagine it's just on the floor. If you can initiate that ant into into knowing that there's an above to it, is that the way up the z-axis exists, would be initiating that ant. So that's the easy definition. I think it would be able to just be aware of a reality, even if you can't access it. It's just a way to make you, especially, into feel that and to experience it directly, because that's the initiations. Is something that it stays with you. So it's a sort of visceral experience where you've kind of like, I know there's more, instead of just kind of being like, I'm reading about it, I'm hoping there's more, which is kind of that imposter syndrome as well. It's like, have I been initiated? It's
right.
Like, I've read enough. I think it's passively happened. I've read enough books. I feel initiated. I think I'm sorry,
no.
One more thing I was thinking, because common examples, I think a lot of near-death experiences can initiate a lot of people. Born again Christians, I would say, are initiated. They're initiated because they often you find them to be the most Christian. They the most fervent Christians. Often born again, because they it seems to be it often comes from near-death experiences, and then it could even just be something like movies as well, or any pop culture. A lot of that's why art exists. A lot of times you could argue, as a way of initiating the mind to different possibilities or emotions even.
Yeah, I could definitely say, because I thinking about initiations across just the Western world in general, like we've gotten rid of so many, except if you're like, even, because I always think about, we grew up in America, so we're kind of taught or learned about Native Americans and how, if you were at least a Native American boy of a certain tribe, they'd give you a knife and send you out into the woods and like figure it out for a few days or whatever. And we don't really have that. We don't really have that for men and boys in particular. I mean, women, we go through obviously our own biological initiation that happens when you're teenagers, but we've kind of gotten rid of a lot of initiations as a society. And then added on to what you're talking about in your description about people like spiritually being initiated back, right? Because you lived your Apollonian, your materialistic world, but guess what? Death is coming soon. So you're kind of need to be reinitiated back into the spiritual, but we're, and that's sort of what I believe is happening for a lot of people who are experiencing daimonic realities, NDEs, alien, like they're sort of being primed to be guides, in my opinion.
Because I mean, they instantly become guides like the moment they choose to share these stories. Because often the stories seem to persist through the conviction of the person who originally tells the story, and then whoever gets told, and then also propagates it, the conviction that it was true and it happened.
Right.
You know, like that is a sort of, it's intangible, obviously, but it carries through. I think it definitely adds to it. It's definitely the reason why some persist and some don't. Is, you know, I think, you know, the hoaxes, you know, what people say, whatever, you know, it's not, it wasn't a real embodied felt experience, so it's not going to carry over.
Right.
You know, so I think it's a big part of what makes these stories possible, and it's also what makes them possible to happen at all. You know, is that the way memory can sort of smooth over and rewrite and basically turn it into something that was probably, it wasn't originally.
Right.
And so, yeah, that daimonic aspect of it, where it's like, you know, the story now is most stories probably aren't anything like the original telling of it. They've been reshaped so many times, but there's something essential about it that remains.
Yeah. I know because I listen to a lot of podcasts and YouTube shows about people explaining their NDEs, and exactly what you're explaining. It's like you're basically you're having to go on somebody's anecdotal evidence of what they experienced, but people love it. It's like hugely popular because I think people are craving like, wow, this person is very convincing and seems like they went through a thing. Like, what does that mean? Yeah, very cool. And I also thinking about, you know, being magicians and having a magical practice, like we've sort of taken on the mantle to become our own guides and shamans and to kind of figure it out. Sometimes and I think that's why a lot of magicians wind up writing books, to be honest, because they're wanting to share.
That's a reflex is as strong too. A lot of times is like, I want to share, you know, like the stuff I experienced, but you know, the fourth maxim, keep silence. And so, you know, I find you know, the quiet satisfaction just working alone, you know, because I have a partner who doesn't do anything like this. You know, she's, as I loosely will say, just a muggle. You know, like, and we keep it separate. And, you know, I'll tell her, you know, it's just like every morning, it's like, hey, I'm gonna go do ritual and meditate, see you in a little bit. You know, it's just a part of the routine, but it's just something completely separate. Apart from her just needing to live around all my art and books and stuff. It's like, I tell her, you know, like, a few days ago, I got a Zeus statue. He's gonna be over there now.
Me too. Yeah.
My wealth altar.
Yep.
And we're working on it.
Did you make or do you already have like a Jupiter box and all that fun stuff?
I'm working. I drew on it here.
You drew one?
I'm gonna wood burn it, I think.
Oh, cool.
But in my cash box is the 4 symbols there.
Oh, nice.
I got his one, you know, his special one, and then just the regular one. I got, this is a geomantic for acquisitio, which is Jupiter. So I figured geomantic, you know, it's earthly money. It's good for money. And there's this 4 goddesses one.
Nice.
As well, I figured it'd be good as well. But on Thursday, I'm gonna paint it. You know, obviously on Thursday. Get all that done.
Thursday,
The success stories sound too compelling. I'm just kind of like,
I know. Like, really?
What am I doing if I'm not doing wealth magic?
Yeah.
If all this money I spend on books, I got to be doing, you know, if I'm doing nothing else, why am I not doing wealth magic? So I'm doing it. I'm getting in on it. Got
to attract the money so you can buy those expensive magic books and out of print copies.
Because now I'm sad because I thought I'd be happy with hardcover. Like, no, now I need the collector's edition. They're so nice. They're so great to hold. Oh, I can't help it.
Yeah. Man. I love that Jupiter energy. Anyway, I'll just go on about that. But
I've been feeling it.
Yeah. Let's see. What are my notes here? Okay, we kind of already covered that. Okay. I think we're totally wrapping up here.
Let's see here.
We kind of hit everything. I did have, if at all, that did this book impact your magical practice in any way, do you think?
I would say it hasn't. No, not my practice. It hasn't. Because I don't think it's. Yeah, it hasn't really. It definitely has as a passive influence or something. Definitely when I first read it as well, when it just sort of helps loosen the normalcy filter, and giving these stories, especially some more concrete ones with the evidence, like that little fairy shoe made of mouse skin that exists. Like chew on that. Like who made, like they said, it might have been a journeyman piece, to demonstrate skill, but why was it in the middle of nowhere? Sorry for the listeners, the story about this in Ireland, because all the fairy stories seem to happen in Ireland because that's where the legends are, obviously. That's right. So obviously that's where they would experience them, but they just found, off the beaten path, this tiny little shoe, and it turned out to be, it looks like it was they finally worked with all stitching, it turned out to be made of mouse skin, and it exists, and I saw a picture of it in the book, so it's just like, explain that, and so that's, and you can't, and that's sort of the point, but it's as concrete as these, as crop circles. And so for my practice, just having those stories and just being able to be like, those things ostensibly happened, ostensibly, sorry, I'm trying to use that. And so it helps just accept some of the more accept a daimonic reality is possible, and so that helps with mental states during ritual, I would say, definitely in meditation. So I would say it loosely has helped my practice, but as far as his conclusions, about how I'm not sure, like it, I don't know if I agree with everything he says, but it's not really that important, I don't think, at the end of the day, because what he gives is, it's a way of mapping reality, or at least it's an attempt to. And so I think he has a lot of compelling arguments, and but at the end of the day, the arguments themselves are unimportant, which is his, I think, the ultimate point. And so what matters, I think, is how it really feels, it's the importance of embodied experience, and because ultimately all these, all the events he gives in the book, happen to one person most of the time, like just some loose, shared events, but it's just the highly subjective experiences that happen, and you need to just sort of put it in a context of yourself, of it happening to you, and like, how does something happening to you actually, like, feel, reading a story about it, versus like being there and seeing, like, whatever it was, the freaking bright lights blinding you, and the weird smell, and seeing a being come from a ship. It doesn't matter how, if that happens to you, it doesn't matter, how hard that normalcy filter is going to be grinding in to try to smooth that out of your memory. That's going to be it's a strong, indelible mark, then you're going to share that story, and it's going to propagate, and the propagation of these stories, I think, is just as much of the original events as the event itself. It's sort of partaking of both, like daimonic events are both, real events and stories at the same time, I think, and that's how you just accept them, like, it happened, but it's also a story, because that's I think that's ultimately where these narratives come from. It's the stories we all know, underneath the surface. I would say it hasn't. No, not my practice. It hasn't. Because I don't think it's. Yeah, it hasn't really. it definitely has as a passive influence or something. Definitely when I first read it as well, when it just sort of helps loosen the normalcy filter, and giving these stories, especially some more concrete ones with the evidence, like that little fairy shoe made of mouse skin that exists. Like chew on that. Like who made, like they said, it might have been a journeyman piece, like to demonstrate skill, but why was it in the middle of nowhere? This sorry for the listeners, the story about this in Ireland, because all the fairy stories seem to happen in Ireland because that's where the legends are, obviously. That's right. So obviously that's where they would experience them. But they just found, off the beaten path, this tiny, tiny little shoe, and it turned out to be. It looks like it was they finally worked with all stitching. It turned out to be made of mouse skin. And it exists. And I saw a picture of it in the book. So it's just like, explain that. And so that's and you can't, and that's sort of the point. But it's as concrete as these, as crop circles. And so for my practice, just having those stories and just being able to be like, those things ostensibly happened, ostensibly. Sorry, I'm trying to use that. And so it helps just accept some of the more accept that a daimonic reality is possible. And so that helps with mental states during ritual, I would say, definitely in meditation. So I would say it loosely has helped my practice. But as far as his conclusions, about how I'm not sure, like it, I don't know if I agree with everything he says, but it's not really that important, I don't think, at the end of the day, because what he gives it's a way of mapping reality, or at least it's an attempt to. And so I think he has a lot of compelling arguments, and but at the end of the day, the arguments themselves are unimportant, which is I think, the ultimate point. And so what matters, I think, is how it really feels. It's the importance of embodied experience. And because ultimately all these, all the events he gives in the book, happen to one person most of the time. Like just some loose, shared events, but it's just the highly subjective experiences that happen, and you need to just sort of put it in a context of yourself, of it happening to you, and like how does something happening to you actually like feel, reading a story about it, versus like being there and seeing, like whatever it was, the freaking bright lights blinding you and the weird smell, and seeing a being come from a ship. It doesn't matter how, if that happens to you, it doesn't matter, how hard that normalcy filter is going to be grinding in to try to smooth that out of your memory. That's going to be it's a strong, indelible mark, and then you're going to share that story, and it's going to propagate, and the propagation of these stories, I think, is just as much of the original events as the event itself. It's sort of partaking of both, like daimonic events are both, real events and stories at the same time, I think. And that's how you just accept them, like it happened, but it's also a story, because that's I think that's ultimately where these narratives come from. It's the stories we all know underneath the surface.
I like that conclusion and explanation. It's really good. I know it did make me laugh, though, because toward the end of the book, he was basically like, I'm telling you that, to think all Apollonian is a detriment, right? You got to like accept the Dionysian way of thinking. But he's like, but I totally get that me writing this book is very Apollonian and like putting structure around it, right? So I did think that was funny.
Yeah, it is. Oh my, no, it's just like it reminds me of the phrase when I think it was David Chaim Smith said it. It's just like trying to understand non-duality is in itself duality.
Mm-hmm.
That's infuriating.
Yep.
That statement's infuriating. And it's so, it's just like, ultimately I'm trying to tell you these deeply sensual, mysterious experiences with words, the most, the least useful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's an aspect of that is why the stories are able to exist, is their imprecise nature allows it to you sort of fill in the gaps a bit, and then it becomes a bit more personal and then a bit more believable at the same time. And so that's what I think is really fascinating about all these stories, that they really do feel like something that I could be remembering.
Yeah.
And I think that was the most compelling part about it. And just it made me accept that, his premise that they're psychologically based events, because I feel it.
Yeah.
I feel like especially like dreams. They all feel like dreams I could have had.
Mm-hmm.
They're very dreamlike nature to
them. Yeah. Well, wow. Yeah. Thank you so much. Very articulate. This was very enjoyable. I appreciate this conversation so much.
I tried. I was very, very nervous. I rambled.
No, you were great. No,
okay,
you were great. So not to totally deviate, but I tend to ask the question at the end of like sort of a motto that I say motto, and I feel like I need to change that, but either like a motto or a mantra or some words of wisdom that you've been enjoying lately that you'd like to share.
Yeah. Well, the phrase I gave her, well, not phrase, but I think we've been saying it a lot, so it's less profound than I do know. But it's like try to lessen, your Apollonian grip on your own personal microcosm. The world, the subjective world you experience. And how it intersects with the macrocosm, because we exist in the space right in between. Between macro and micro. We don't exist solely in the microcosm. And we partake of both. And so stop, let the stories kind of leak in, and let two truths coexist. I think it's hard, but it's, like, don't, it's the reflex for explanation. I think, I don't know how, especially as a society, we'll get, but it's so useful.
Yeah.
So I think, there's a time and place, but as far as words of wisdom specifically, as I said before, it's the words of wisdom I receive, and so I'm going to spread the gospel of meditation. That's it. It's meditate, learn silence, know where you are. Be oriented. It's simple matter of, in an occult fashion, it's just the directional rituals. It's whether you do the LBRP, just understand, north, south, east, west, up, down. I think that's being knowing where the center of you is. It's just it's hard to explain if you don't do it regularly and stuff. Do the directionals, walk through 6 ways. It's we like to, I used to share a lot, but just knowing where you are, be aligned to the directions, and just my last word was ghost raccoon. Because that's just the phrase I use. I guess it's my reflexive mantra for it. Just sort of like, in events, it doesn't matter if things actually happen, especially,
Ghost raccoon.
Yeah. Faded away there at the end.
Yeah. Cool. And I like the thought around directions. And you mentioned Aidan walked her in 6 ways, and he talks about the crossroads, and you're like kind of blew my mind a little bit. Yeah.
That's all I could think of, just because because of like, what did I write this for? It's just like, know your directions, because like I know that's important, but if I'm telling someone to, like, I'm trying to just think of the better context. It's like to be aligned to the directions. I guess if you're before with the east, you see what's coming towards you. If with the west, it's what's receding behind you. It also, is the east would be your active consciousness, and the west is the unconscious. So just having it behind you and in front, being forward thinking with your consciousness, but being at the same time knowing what's behind you. And then the south, with your peak, and then the north with the low. It just in being in the center of the flow, and existing that way has been very beneficial as well.
Cool. Wow. Yeah. Again, you're very articulate with how you explain these things. And I'm like, yeah. It's kind of firing off my brain cells. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Is there a way, we talked a little bit about how folks, if they want to reach out to you, how they can contact you. So how could they do that?
Yeah. If you got any good speech therapists, public speaking people, I would love to hear from you. No, that's fine. I'm just looking, I think I'm just King Rainbow 8, all one word, on Discord. I've got a skull for a head in the picture, so it's probably it's someone else will play. It'll be that picture. Yeah. So, if you want to say something, that'd be cool. I don't know what, but sure.
Well, thank you so much, Iain, for sharing all your thoughts and wanting to talk about this book. And I'm so jazzed because you're probably one of the few people that I've mentioned this book to. And I'm like, but it's so good. And I love that you were willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
That was the discussion of the book Daimonic Reality by Patrick Harpur with left-hand magical practitioner Iain Shelley. Please see the show notes on how to find Iain on Discord and the links to the books mentioned in our discussion. To help support the show and be involved in its growth, please be sure to leave a review on iTunes, as it helps immensely. New episodes of The Casual Temple will be released every Wednesday. To learn more, please visit casualtemple.com, where you can listen to past episodes and learn about my energy healing and psychic reading offerings with Celestial Ring guidance. Please be sure to share this episode with the people in your life who enjoy this content. Do check out the other episodes of the Casual Temple podcast on your preferred podcast app. There's a Casual Temple YouTube channel, so please like, share, and subscribe, and click the notification bell. And thank you so much for listening.